Alright, in this video we're going to work out some problems from 6.4, which was the quadratic formula. Remember the quadratic formula? Let me put it over here so that we have it the whole time. It's negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, and that's for an equation in this form. So it's got to be with everything on one side. Everything on one side, the a is always in front of the x squared, b in front of x, and c is by itself. Okay, so let's try a couple problems. Let's say that we have 3x squared minus 2x is equal to 2. Alright, whatever method we choose, the first thing that we want to do, unless, I guess the only exception would be completing the square, but for most of these you're going to look for factoring or quadratic formula. So let's move everything to one side. Okay, and you can check to see if this factors. It's definitely not going to factor like easily. You'd have to do the AC method because there's a 3 out front. It's actually not going to factor. So we would go ahead and use the quadratic formula. We've got it in the right form here. So here's A, here's B, and here's C. And we're not going to use the x's, just the numbers. And we're going to plug that into the quadratic formula. So I'm going to have negative 2 plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we plug all of those numbers in, trying to be careful, and then we simplify. So negative 2 would be positive 2. Negative 2 squared is going to come out to positive 4. On the next part, negative is going to come out positive, and then I've got 4 times 3 times 2 is 24, all over 6. Okay, I think the toughest part of quadratic formula and where people usually go wrong are the signs underneath the square root. So remember, when you square something, it's always going to come out positive, and then you've got to be really careful with the signs in the second part as well. So we simplify a little bit, we get 2 plus or minus the square root of 28 over 6. Alright, now, all problems should simplify down to something that looks like this, and then you've got to check and see if it's going to simplify anymore. It's tempting to try to cancel the 2 and the 6, but you can't, because remember, you can't cancel over addition or subtraction. So we need to simplify the square root of 28 and see if we can do anything more. Let me come up over here. Alright, so I've got 2 plus or minus the square root of 28 over 6, and I want to see if I can do anything more with this. 28 is the same as 4 times 7, so I can simplify that. You can simplify it off to the side, or you can do it in the fraction. Either way is fine. I know that 28 is 4 times 7, and I know that I can simplify the square root of 4. That's going to be 2 square root of 7. Okay, so now we see that all of the terms can be reduced by 2. So there's 2 different ways that you can think of this, and it doesn't matter to me which one you do, just as long as you're being careful. So one is to reduce them all by 2. So you think of this as like 2 over 6 plus or minus 2 square root of 7 over 6. And then I can see that I can reduce all of them. So that's going to be 1/3, and that's going to be 1/3. And then if you want, you can put them back together as 1 plus 1, or yeah, 1 plus 1 square root of 7 over 3. This method can be easier if you're putting in a calculator, but if you want to get back to this form, which I think you do for the homework, this probably isn't the easiest way to do it because you might end up with a denominator that's not the same. So the easier way to do this is to either reduce it all by the same amount, or think of it as factoring a 2 out to the front. Okay, so I know that I can reduce them all by 2. If I factor the 2 out to the front, then I can reduce it, because then it's over multiplication, and I get 1 plus or minus the square root of 7 over 3. Okay, so either way you're reducing them all by 2. Just be careful on how you do it. The one method that you cannot do is to do like that. Okay, because it's over addition or subtraction. If you do that, you have to reduce, like I can reduce all of the terms by 2, like that, Okay, or you can do it like this where you factor it out and reduce it. All right, but whichever method you use, your final answer should be 1 plus or minus square root of 7 over 3. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, let's say that we've got, let's do x squared plus 3x plus 5 equals 0. So this one's already in the right form. We've got everything on one side. So here's our A, our B, and our C. And let's go ahead and plug this one in. So we're going to have negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so we plugged in our a, our b, and our c. And now we're going to simplify. So we get negative 3 plus or minus. Here we're going to get positive 9 minus 20 over 2. And that's going to give us negative 11 underneath the square root. So we've got negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 11 over 2. Now remember, if we get negative 11 in this square root, that means that this is not going to be a real number. And typically when we solve quadratics, we're only looking for the real solutions. The homework should say, what are the real solutions? So this is not a real number. So we would say no real solution or D and E. Okay, it does exist over the complex or imaginary, but not over the real numbers. So if you see a negative underneath the square root, double check your signs first. But if you get a negative under the square root, that's going to be no solution. Okay, let's do another one. Let's say that we've got, my example go, here we go. 1/2 x squared minus 2/3 x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, so this is in the right form. We've got everything on one side. We've got our a, our b, and our c, but this isn't exactly the best form to work it out in. The nice thing about quadratic formula is that you can use fractions, decimals, square roots, anything, and put them into the formula, but we could make this a little bit easier to deal with to start with if you want to. I think it would make life a whole lot easier. So we've done this before. How do we clear fractions in an equation? You can clear fractions by multiplying through by the LCD. We've got a 2 and a 3, so if I want to clear all the fractions, I can multiply through by a 6. Multiply the entire equation by 6, that should clear all the fractions. So if you have fractions, or if your first term is not a negative, you may want to work with the equation a little bit before you go to the quadratic formula. You can put this in the quadratic formula, but it'd be pretty messy. Alright, so I'm going to have 6 times 1/2 x squared. I'm going to have 6 times 2/3 x, 6 times 2, and 6 times 0. So I multiply everything by 6, just like we did in our rational function section. And we get 3x squared for the first term. Cancels here, and I get 4x for the second term. Minus 12 equals 0. So we multiply everything through by 6. It's the same equation, same solutions, but this is a whole lot easier to work with. So now here's my a, here's my b, here's my c, and I don't have to deal with any fractions. So I'm going to put that into the formula. I'm going to have negative 4 plus or minus negative 4 squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Kind of short on space here, so let's do 4 plus or minus. This is going to be 16 plus 12 times 12 is 144 all over 6. I'm going to continue this over here on the left. So that's going to give me 4 plus or minus the square root of 160 over 6. Okay. The 4 and the 6 will reduce. It looks like the 160 is going to simplify. So let's go ahead and see what we can do with that. I'm going to bring 160 over here just because it's a big number. I should be able to break that up as 16 and 10. I can take the square root of 16. That's going to be 4 square root of 10. Looks like that's as far as I can go because I can't reduce square root of 10 anymore, and I got 4 square root of 10. Okay, 4 plus 4 square root of 10 over 6. The most I can reduce all of these by is 2. So I'm going to factor a 2 out of the top. And that's going to reduce with the bottom to give me 3. So now I've got 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 10 over 3. So make sure your square root doesn't reduce, and make sure that your numbers don't reduce anymore. And that's the final answer there. All right. Okay, so that goes through some of the basic ideas. Let's do one similar to the homework word problems. So one of the, there's a height problem, I think, and a rectangle problem. So let's do the rectangle problem. So they work pretty similarly. The rectangle says that you've got something like the length is 5 more than the width. The area is, let's say 40, and we want to know what are the dimensions. Alright, so let's draw our picture. It says the length is 5 more than the width. So if this is the width, this is going to be 5 more. So you can use any letter you want. I've got W and W plus 5. We know that the area is 40. And we also know that the area for a rectangle is length times width. So it's going to be W times W plus 5. So W times W plus 5 has got to be equal to 40. So we want to figure out what W is when the area is 40. So we can distribute this. We get W squared plus 5W equals 40. And then we're going to move everything to one side. This is a quadratic equation now. And we're going to solve this using the quadratic formula because it's not going to factor. We've got factors of 4 and 10, 8 and 5. Neither one of those are going to give us 5 in the middle. So we've got our A, our B, and our C. So we're going to have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4AC all over 2A. I'm running out of time on my video, so I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. This is going to be 25 plus 160. That's going to be 185 over 2. Now for this one, this is an actual problem where I didn't look at what the format for the answer is, but you're probably going to want it in decimals. So from here, you're going to want to put this in your calculator as negative 5 plus 185 over 2 and negative 5 minus 185 over 2. Let me see if I can get at least one of those before this video cuts out. Okay, so negative 5 plus square root of 185 over 2. Okay, so for this one, you should get 4.3. You've got to make sure that you do the negative 5 and the square root of 185 first, and then divide the whole thing by 2, not just this part. So make sure that you get 4.3 for that one, and then negative 5 minus square root of 185 over 2. That cut out. Hold on. Negative 5 minus square root of 185 over 2. Okay, I get negative 9.3 for this one. Alright, so make sure that you use your calculator and check those, and that you've got it going into the calculator correctly as well.